CoMotion Labs Patent Portfolio Manager, and I am your host today. If you've joined us before, you know that CoMotion Labs is a multi-industry incubator hosting early-stage startups from both inside and outside the UW community. We are committed to nurturing and enabling the success of our startups, contributing critical infrastructure and opportunities for learning, mentoring, and networking. And we do this without taking equity or IP. We have 3 incubators in 2 locations on campus: Life Sciences and Hardware in Fluke Hall and Tech here in Startup Hall. If you are a founder looking for a community to help your startup grow and flourish, we'd love to talk to you. Fundamentals for Startup is a regular lecture series open to anyone interested in learning about entrepreneurship or building a startup. Every week, we bring in experts with diverse perspectives and experiences to share insights, inspire action, and offer space for questions. A few announcements before we get started. All the Fundamentals for Startups presentations are archived on YouTube and the CoMotion website, where you can filter by topic. To learn about and register for future fundamental events, visit CoMotion Labs online and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Today, I'm excited to introduce Gaurav Sareen, Corporate Vice President at Microsoft. In addition to being my wonderful husband, Gaurav is a tech startup veteran who leads teams with thousands of engineers in his role. Today, Gaurav will talk about the self-leadership mindset that empowers a leader to look within, question assumptions and expectations, and let go of habits and behaviors that don't work. This process of unlearning and rewiring will make you a stronger team leader and entrepreneur. Welcome, Gaurav.
Well, Happy New Year, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with all of you to start 2024 together. And it's such a great topic. I'm used to speaking on sometimes technical topics, sometimes business topics, but Venu challenged me. She said, for your own growth, why don't you talk about how to achieve success without stress? And to do that, how I had to rewire my brain. And some of this may be directly applicable to you. Some of this may be challenging your own assumptions. And some of this may be giving you thought for the future. So my goal here today is to share my perspective. But actually, instead of just sharing my perspective, I would love to actually hear from you throughout the discussion. So anytime you have a question or comment, please raise your hand. There's somebody with the mic, because I love to actually make it interactive as much as possible. So a little bit about me. So I grew up in India and then moved to the US. So there's a couple of things here that I wanted to call out. One is that even though I grew up in India, the first impression people have of India is it must be hot, it must be crowded, and it must be noisy and chaotic. Now, where I grew up, that's a picture of my hometown. And you can see it snowed there, it's relatively quiet. It's a town up in the Himalayas called Shimla. It's about 7,000 feet in height. And it was great growing up there. And one thing I like about Seattle is that Seattle feels a lot closer to home than most of India does. Then I went to New Delhi. There's a college called IIT where I did computer science for my undergrad. And that was more typical India. And so I lived in Shimla, then I lived in Delhi. And then soon after my undergrad, I moved to the US. And so I lived about half my life in India and half in the US. And the one thing I've learned through this, but also other places, that you should never trust averages. Because if you look at the average, then I've lived my life in Europe, where I've never lived. And I've seen that even in our work, that people just go after the average, and it is misleading in quite many ways. So now I live with my family. I have Venu, and I have 2 young sons. We live in Sammamish, which is maybe about 30 miles east from here. And there's some interest I've developed over time. I'm a big Seahawks fan. I'm hoping that they can pull it off this week and they can get a little bit help from the Bears. I also enjoy reading quite a bit. I like to do yoga, meditation, as we'll talk about in a bit. And then in the summers, I enjoy hiking. So let's talk a little bit about my career journey. So I'm a Microsoft veteran. So I joined Microsoft end of 2001, so it's been more than 20 years. But before Microsoft, my experience was in startups. And only a couple startups, because I don't know, many of you may be too young to remember, but 2001 was a very tough time for startups. So I joined a couple startups, and they failed. And at that point, I thought of that as a sort of a failure in terms of the start to my career. But actually, those startups taught me a lot, and it really helped me throughout my career. These startups, one was in billing, one was in security. And what I learned was less about the specific technology, because technology always changes, but the mindset that it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur. And when I joined Microsoft, one of the lucky things for me was that I started a new team. So I was one of the first engineers, and actually I was the number 2 hire for what became the Bing search engine. So for my first half of my career at Microsoft, my core job was basically engineering, which is like coding, debugging, testing, analysis, mostly on the Bing search engine. And I built a lot of the infrastructure that powers Bing. Then in 2010, I moved into a more of a leadership role. Because what happened was that Microsoft was changing at that time, and we wanted to become more of a cloud company. So some of the work that we had done in Bing actually became more central, because the same kind of work, same kind of infrastructure was now not just needed for Bing, but for Office, for Xbox, for every other service we had. And not just that, Microsoft was ready to launch Microsoft Azure, which, as you know, is a cloud infrastructure provider. And a lot of the technology was inspired or even directly came from what we had built in Bing. Then in 2015, I was getting a little, I spent too much time in the infrastructure world. So I wanted to do something new. And that's when I joined what we call the Microsoft 365 team now. It used to be called the Office team. And now I lead some of our products, which are part of Microsoft 365. That in these areas, what I learned is that even though from the outside, Microsoft may seem like one company, but from the inside, when you work in Bing or Office or Xbox or Windows or Azure, it's really about working in so many different companies. And that's the one thing that I've been very fortunate about, because by working there, I got to experience a lot of different perspectives. Starting off as an engineer, and then now I lead a team of thousands of people. Actually, I wanted to show a quick glimpse of my team. This is part of my Redmond team, and the reason I like this picture is that this is the kind of team I want to lead, which is people are excited, they are happy, and enjoying the sunshine, which hopefully we'll get in a couple months. This is part of my Redmond team. A big part of my team is also in India and China. But let's get to the topic today, which is about rewiring my brain. So the one thing that, and again, some of you may have experienced it yourself, is that we actually never really experience reality directly. We actually experience the reality that's created by our own brain. And this reality is based on certain assumptions that we carry, that we view the world through. That's how everyone's brain works. I think the important thing here is that as we view the world through our assumptions, once in a while, it's also good to look at those assumptions, because that gives you an opportunity to see if those assumptions are still serving you, or perhaps they need to be changed. So Robert Keegan, he's a professor at Harvard, and he has a very nice model about talking about how we can continue to transform ourselves by examining our assumptions. So what I thought for today was that I picked 5 assumptions that I had carried over the years, but now I have learned to actually change them. Because as we'll talk about, what I've found is that, yes, these assumptions have a certain purpose, but also I discovered how they were inadequate or some cases misleading, and then what I've learned and what I have changed. And as we talk through these, please again, feel free to interrupt me with questions, comments, anything that you want to add, because I would love for us to have a discussion. Because one of my goals is that I want to learn from you as well, not just present. So please, at any time. So let's start with the first one. And many of you may have heard about this called follow your passion. I used to think that too. As a teenager, actually, I had two passions. By the way, all the images that are here, they are generated by Microsoft Designer. So Microsoft Designer has combined my two passions from my teenage, cricket and Bollywood. So this cricketer here looks like a Bollywood star. And those were my passions. And if you ask me when I was 16 years old, if I was to follow my passion, I would either be playing cricket or I would be in Bollywood. Thankfully, I did not follow my passion. On the one side, I have no talent. If I was to play cricket, I'm probably average, maybe below average, compared to at least the average people in India. And for Bollywood, you need the good looks and the charm, and I just don't have that. So thankfully, I did not follow the passion. The other reason that I'm thankful is supply-demand. India's, I don't know, India's population is 1.4 billion, so let's just make up, there is probably at least 100 million people who are 16-year-old male boys who would like to be a cricketer or a Bollywood star. And the Indian cricket team literally has 11 people. There's probably maybe, and I'll make it up a number, 20 male heroes in Bollywood who actually would be called successful stars. 100 million to whatever, 30, not a good ratio, not a good supply-demand. And the third thing which I found for myself with passion, it was very fickle. Yes, this picture shows cricket because that was the most common, but I remember during cricket season, I would want to be a cricket star. 3 months later, it would be soccer season, and I would love to play soccer. Then I would watch Wimbledon, and I would like to be Pete Sampras or whoever those people were in those days. So passion is something that changes moment by moment, which is great, but it's not a way to decide what you want to do for your career. Now my model is that you actually have to find the intersection of three things for you to have a successful career. The first thing is to figure out what the world needs. We are here to serve each other, and to understand what needs others have is critical for us to be able to do our best job in whatever we choose to do. Second thing, what you are good at. Like I said, I wasn't very good at cricket, but I was good at math. So when I looked at my academic performance, I was, at least in those days, exceptionally good at problem solving, math, science, physics was my favorite subject. That was what I was good at. And the third thing is what you enjoy doing. Because you have to find something that you like to do, because otherwise you can't sustain yourself. So my advice would be that instead of following the passion, look at the intersection of these things. What the world needs, what you are good at, and what you enjoy doing. And that's how, for example, in my case, I ended up being a software engineer. There was a lot of demand in the world for software engineering. I found that I was pretty good at it, and I loved doing software engineering. So that would be my reassumption now, that changing the assumption from following our passion. I think follow your passion is a little bit like wet streets cause rain. When the reality is that, yes, passion is extremely important, but I think passion is what you bring to what you do yourself. You cannot be successful without passion, because if you are not excited about what you're doing, the quality of your work will suffer. But to decide what to do, you have to really look at the three things I talked about, and then do what you do with complete passion, complete ownership, because that will enable you to both do the best as well as enjoy what you're doing. Any questions? Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. but please, again, feel free to interrupt at any time. The second assumption, and again, I was growing up in India, so maybe that's what I learned, that success has to mean stress and sacrifice. That there's a separation between sort of earning it and enjoying it. That in order to serve others, I had to sacrifice myself. That you have to really suck it up. But this really never resonated with me. And over the years, I've really revisited this assumption. I think the biggest reason for me there is that, is success really worth it if it's coming after years of sucking it up? Do you really need to have this attitude that, oh, stress is the cost that I must pay, that I have to not care for myself in order to care for others? I think what I got inspired by, there was a short sort of fable story in India. There's a man, he went to a fakir. A fakir is like a saint or just a ascetic. And he said, okay, well, I'm very stressed and all of these things, what can I do? So the fakir gave him sort of regular advice, like you can almost say motherhood apple pie, that, oh, you should do these things, you should like be more spiritual, you should spend more time with your family, you should do this and that. And the man said, yeah, that's all a good idea, but really I'm so busy with what I'm doing, I can't do that. What can you offer that I can still stay busy with my life and still not feel stressed? So Fakir said, okay, I'll tell you the answer. I need to go across the river, come with me. So when they went to the shore, the Fakir just sat there. And maybe after 10 minutes, the man said, are we going or not going? He said, no, I'm just waiting. He said, what are you waiting for? He said, oh, this river is flowing. When the water finishes flowing, we'll just walk across. He said, but that's just stupid. Like, this water is never going to stop flowing. And the Fakir said, the same is true for your life. It's never not going to be busy. It's always going to be one thing or the other. You have to figure out a way that the river flows and you still get across. So whether you find a bridge to cross the river, you get a boat, you even swim across, that's up to you. That's a choice you can make. But to say that somehow, or today this river is flowing and tomorrow I can walk across, is just a fallacy. But I've seen that fallacy a lot of times in my own career, both in my own behavior in the past, but also people around me, that you talk to them, they say, oh, I have these big plans, but oh, I'm just too busy this quarter, this year. But I think you really have to figure out how you can not think about living in the future, but actually enjoy what you're doing today. I think the best exposition of this actually came from Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a famous Vietnamese monk who passed away a couple of years ago, but he had a very nice, you can say, advice about doing your dishes. His advice was that the reason for doing the dishes is not just to have clean dishes. Yes, that's a nice effect. But actually, you should do the dishes to do the dishes, which is that enjoy every moment as you are experiencing that. And that's true for work as well as anything in personal life. That every day there's an opportunity to enjoy, and it's our job to find that opportunity. Now, some of you may say, but Gaurav, the world is full of so many problems. How can I enjoy every day? There are so many things wrong with this world. True, but there's also a lot of things right with this world. Satya Nadella, who's the CEO at Microsoft, I've learned a lot from him. But the one advice that probably has stuck the most with me, this is when I became a leader. He had a meeting where he said, as a leader, and pardon my language because that's the language he used, so I have an excuse. He said, as a leader, your job is to find rose petals in piles of shit. That you will be surrounded by all kinds of problems. Yes, but as a leader, you don't get an excuse. Your job is to find those rose petals, both for yourself and for your team. And I think it's such an important advice. It's important in my role as a leader for my team, but actually it's important in our own lives as well. I think there's so many things wrong in the world. There's war, there's disease, there's crime, there's climate, there's so many other things going wrong. But it's our job to not get fixated on all the things that are going wrong, but have the determination to keep looking for, finding, and then appreciating any rose petals you'll find. And I can assure you there's a lot of rose petals out there. Well, I'm not getting any questions. Either I'm being very clear or everything is too... So the next assumption I had was that you manifest your destiny. So what I heard, and this was actually a book also some time ago. I'd never read the book, but the gist was that you just visualize the outcomes, and then you just say creative and spontaneous, and things will just happen for you. The universe will align for you to, whatever, get to your destiny. Maybe it works for some people, but I can tell you it did not work for me. I think what I have realized is that you have to actually create your destiny by your actions. That you need to be clear about what your values are and how do you align how you live with those values. To me, it has been very transformational to give up this chance, this thinking that, oh, you can just manifest your destiny by just thinking about it. I had to take active steps. And what I thought today is to give you a glimpse into the steps I take. I'll talk about two specific things I've learned. But again, these are things that I do. They may or may not work for you, but I just want to leave you with saying that you have to actually take action and not just dream, because action is what defines your life. So what I'm going to do is I'll give you a glimpse of my calendar. So I have two calendars actually. One I use for work, one I use for home. Now thankfully, one of the products I lead is Outlook, so I have the ability to influence that as well. But here actually everybody can do that, of course. This is showing my personal calendar, just a little bit of snippet of the morning. And then I have a work calendar, which is in my work account, and then there's an evening part of this calendar as well. To me, the specifics here are personal in the sense that they may not apply to you. But the concept that I have here is that once I decide, for example, a few years ago I picked up meditation. And when I initially picked up meditation, it was more like, well, I'll do it whenever I get a chance. You know what, you get busy, you never really get a chance. So what I have now decided is that, okay, if it is important for me, I'm going to put it on my calendar. Similarly, same thing for exercise. That, yeah, I think a lot of us have, like, this is New Year's time, so I'm sure many of us are having resolutions about exercising more this year. But the one thing I would advise you, whether it is like, for me, it's 6:30 to 7:30, maybe for you it is whatever, 8 to 9, or maybe somebody wants to do it in the evening, whatever works for you. But actually put it on your calendar. And what I have found is that in my own practice, having this kind of predictability, where things are on the calendar that I don't have to think about, actually there's two big advantages. One is these things are the default now. I may not be 100%, so like for example, I'll give you an example. On New Year's Day, we were up late, so I could not go to bed, so I could not wake up for meditation. So I missed meditation on New Year's Day, at least at 5 a.m. I missed it. But that's fine. I think the important thing is that the default is for me to do it. The second thing, which at least in my case works really well, is that there is no cognitive load about thinking about when to exercise. Should I do it in the evening? Should I do it in the morning? Or today's Wednesday, I have this thing going on. Thursday, something else going on. No, it's really a habit, and it's on my calendar. So I similarly have a calendar for the evening. So basically, all the things that I've defined as my values, which I'll talk about in the next slide, there is, in some sense, a tie-up with actually what I do. And so that would be one advice that I've been following for myself that I can share with you, that instead of trying to manifest your destiny, define what your values are and make those values reflect in what you do in your calendar. This is showing my personal calendar, but the same thing holds at work, that if you want to spend time on learning, make time for learning. One of the things that I hear at Microsoft is our employees say, oh, we don't have enough time for learning. Then we create resources for learning, and then after a year we review and the utilization is very poor. So what is going on is that I think people are not aligning their value of learning with the choice of what they are making in how they spend their time.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
So,
Oh, sorry, the mic, can you, yeah.
Sorry about that. Thanks. So, is it working?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I think my question is sort of, you know, you have these times in your day planned out, and then something comes up. And you say, okay, for, you know, New Year's, and you made an exception, but then something comes up again, and something comes up again. So how do you institute some discipline to say,
Yeah.
okay, once, maybe twice, what, I mean, like, how do you institute that discipline to say, no, every day, or
Yeah.
most days, I'm going to do these things?
Yeah, thanks for the question, because my next slide may address a little bit of that, but I'll come back to your question after the next slide. Is that okay?
I'm glad, yeah.
Yes, so thank you, but yes, thank you for the question, because this is what I actually do. So this I learned from an executive coach called Marshall Goldsmith. So Marshall has this thing, what he calls the daily questions exercise. So if you look at this spreadsheet, I'm only showing a little bit of it, but basically, in some sense, these are some of the values that I've identified. So like, I'll pick one. Let's say practice kindness towards myself. So one thing I learned a few years ago is that people are generally, they are kinder to people they love than they are to themselves. So I said, oh, I think, and then of course, I want to be kind to myself. So I said, okay, I'll call that a value that I carry. And the way I'll measure is that how much compassion do I show when I make a mistake or I discover a shortcoming. That's just one example, but this spreadsheet has about 30 rows totally. There's probably half of them shown here. And for each of them, what I do every day, every evening, is to reflect on the day and say how that day was. Let's say for practicing kindness for myself. 1 is low and 5 is high, and 3 is the default. So if it was sort of okay, then I would give myself a 3. If it was better than okay, I would give myself a 4 or 5, and similarly 1 or 2 if it wasn't. And then the important thing here is that instead of the title here being the sort of the actual outcome, it's really about my effort. That did I do my best to? Did I try or did I not try? Because I think that's the main thing we can control. And what this gives me is a daily, and then of course after the week, it becomes the whole week, view of which values am I living up to and which values I'm not. So at the last one here, for example, is read with proper focus. So what I want to do is throughout the day, I want to see if I can have an hour of reading. Sometimes it may be an hour chunk right before bed. It could be maybe 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night, whatever it is. And then later I added the word with proper focus. So what I try to now do is if I'm reading something that is leisure, that's fine. But if I'm reading, let's say, a technical book or a book that teaches me something, then I even take some notes during that. And the notes are not for publishing, that they're really to keep me accountable, that actually I'm reading with proper focus. And this exercise, to me, is not about creating the scorecard, because nobody else sees the score. It's really, I'm showing it here because it's not that I'm hiding, it's just that it's not probably interesting to other people. But asking that question myself every day consciously makes me subconsciously keep this in mind in the future. So if I'm asking myself that, do I have, for example, this, am I controlling snacking? So I have one of the problems, actually this week was probably better because I usually score low on this eating related things, that by having that value noted and thinking about it at least once a day, I also then remind myself about that subconsciously. So now going to your question, that what I start noticing if something keeps getting to be a failure, then I say, oh, I need to change something. I need to maybe put it on the calendar. Like the reading one, like this actually, because this is for last week, so it was a slow week at work, so I'm fours, which is nice because work wasn't very demanding. But let's say I found myself giving myself 1 or 2 every day. Then I may have to say, okay, I'm going to either change the goal, maybe it's just not practical, or have to then adjust my calendar to make room. And that's the active choice that I get to make. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you visualize this data in any way over time for yourself? And do you recommend doing that or not?
Great question. So the short answer is no, I don't. I have thought about it. But to me, actually, it's actually asking the question that is more important than the actual score. So to me, the fact that I get to ask that question of myself every day is the main thing I'm trying to achieve. And in that sense, that's the reason I've done it. But I actually have thought about it. And one thing I found, like last year, I didn't do a visualization, but I just wrote a small macro to see what are the things that I scored the worst at. And it was around the food. That's the area that I need to most actively work on. The nice thing is that I started this exercise a few years ago. My exercise and meditation used to be poor as well. But then 2-3 years ago, I started doing the calendar thing, and those scores have now consistently become high because I've decided that the best I can do for even my family and others is to take care of my mental and physical health. Because sometimes people say, oh, it feels selfish that you're taking like half an hour for meditation, like on the previous slide, half an hour of meditation, 1 hour of exercise every day. That's a lot of personal time. And that's how I initially thought. But now what I think, and that's why you see it's at 5 a.m. because most of my family is sleeping at that time, that the best I can do to be of service to others is to make sure that my mental and my physical health is taken care of. So again, that used to be low, but having the fixed slot helped me get that score to be higher. So the next assumption is about what do we expect from our leaders? Or forget about others, expect from myself as a leader. You may have heard about this like, oh, any show of weakness will be held against you, especially in the work context. Or you have to fake it till you make it, that you must always appear to be on top of things. I think it's quite sad. I think it's quite sad that in most organizations, people are doing 2 jobs, but they're only paid for 1. The first job people do is the job they're supposed to do. I can be a software engineer, you can be a patent attorney, you can be a research scientist. Yes, that's the first job. But the second job that people are not paid to do, but are still doing, is to look perfect at all times doing that. That how do I look good? What do others think of me? Am I on top of things? And I find that this second job actually takes away from the first job and also is a lot of, in some sense, source of agony. Because obviously you're not going to be perfect. Nobody is. But if you're always worried about, oh, do I look perfect? I hope nobody notices my weakness. Actually, you are just causing stress for yourself. What I have found is that it's much more effective to be more vulnerable and embrace the fact that you're not perfect. Now, most people will agree that it's impossible to know everything, that the universe of knowledge is infinite. So why even pretend that you know everything? So what I have tried to embrace now, even I talk to my team and say, my goal is to be less wrong. If you say I don't know, I'll make up some units. If I have 1 million units of ignorance, or by having this discussion, my goal is to make it 990,000. So instead of saying, oh, I know everything, and this lack of knowledge is the only thing to fix, my general thing is that I must be wrong about a lot of things. But at the same time, it's good to actually correct yourself, have less biases, find more information. So my goal is to be less wrong. And I've found that this shift in my mindset from trying to have all the answers, try to be a perfect leader, to become more of a humble leader and be less wrong actually has really helped me in my job as well. Because I think it took away the burden that comes from trying to look perfect. And it also, as a leader, helped me create a culture of psychological safety. So what I think about myself now, this is really, I think Ed Schein's work that he talked about humble leadership, that I want to be a humble leader. And the humble leader also has the easy part and the hard part. The easy part is to appear humble, which is that you always ask questions, you stay curious. And then the hard part is to be humble, which is to admit to yourself that your team knows more than you. That, like in my team, there are thousands of people. Clearly, I can't know about each person what they are doing more than they themselves do. So why even pretend? But I think it's important as leaders to realize that you have a dependency on your team, and it is okay. And I think the challenge here is that as a leader, you can't shrug accountability and responsibility. And that is you can say, the delicate balance. That you can't say, well, yeah, I'm a humble leader, so if something goes wrong, it's not my problem because they made the mistake. It's still, if it is your team, you are 100% accountable for everything that happens through that team. At the same time, you cannot be the union of all the knowledge, all the expertise that the team has. And that kind of humility actually really emphasizes a culture of psychological safety. Psychological safety, some of you have seen the research. It has been identified by several studies now, including at big companies like Google, as well as smaller companies or in academic settings, as the #1 indicator of a high-performance team. And what psychological safety means is that do people feel safe in making mistakes, taking risks, pointing out if other people have made mistakes, because they don't feel that they'll be retaliated against. And I think to create that culture, I had to learn to be a humble leader and leave this persona of trying to be the perfect leader with all the answers behind. Yes, please.
The question says, any tips to share about safeguarding one's personal wellness when circumstances feel urgent or unpredictable?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, to me, I'll share my experience, both in what I've seen in myself as with working with others. I think for people to do their best job, their own needs must be met. So I think in this case, for them asking the question, I think it's really important for them to understand where they are and what personal needs are not being met, and how they can work with their manager, with their teammates, to actually achieve those goals. Because I think, as I said in a couple slides ago, I think suck it up is not a good mentality either for the individual or for the organization. Clearly for the individual it's not great. Like if my needs are not met, if I say I'm sick and still need to go and do hard physical labor, it's not good for me. but actually is also bad for the organization because they're not getting the best out of me. If I was able to take care of myself, maybe today I don't deliver, but maybe tomorrow I can do much more after that. So I think it's really important for us to think of self-care as part of caring for others and not as a, what should I care for myself or care for others? It's an and, it is not an or. Go ahead.
Following up on the safety part, I am curious, so you talked about creating this kind of safety within the team from as a leader, so being humble. In your experience, have you had experience or have seen what are some other approaches that are more structural to your organization or your team that you lead that makes the safety more applicable to everyone else?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. One way, I think it's almost essential for the leader, because I think what happens is that the behavior of the leader actually sets the tone for the entire organization. So that's important. But I think what you're asking is that beyond just the leaders saying that what can we do in terms of structural, like processes and everything. I think I'll give you two things that we have tried to do. One thing we have tried to do is to, whenever making decisions, try to look at the objective criteria more than who has what opinion. And the one specific technique we have tried to use in our meetings is to make it more written communication driven. So what I like to do is that if, let's say, we are having a meeting on a topic, that whoever the presenter is should actually write down their thoughts and send it out in advance. And then in the meeting, we can have discussion based on the written thoughts. Because what happens and again, I don't know if it happens around you, but at least at big companies, is that everybody looks to the most senior person and they want to see what does he or she think, and then everybody wants to make their opinion. But if that happens, then whether deliberately or not, but the moment the senior person opens her mouth, everybody knows what to do. And I think to bring psychological safety, you want to give them at least initially the same voting power so that everybody's opinion can come up. And so I think that's one thing to do, which is to level the playing field through more written communication. The second thing to do, and again, it is a series that one of my colleagues started inside Microsoft. They call it Share Your Fail, where people actually openly talk about when they failed. So see, the goal for us is to drive success, right? Whether you're in a startup, whether you're in a big company, whether you're in academia, we want to be successful. But the thing is, success is not binary. What you want to ensure is people understand that the way you get success is by trying things. Some things will work, some things won't work. And one thing that series does is to actually encourage people to talk about when they were wrong, because then it makes it safe for others to both share when they were wrong and also not feel so bad when they were wrong. It's just natural. So those are the two things that I can suggest. Okay, so this is the last assumption that I'm going to talk about, that knowledge is power. And actually, this is in two ways I had this assumption. The one is like in a very draconian kind of thing in the old school, oh, knowledge is power and I'm going to hoard knowledge. I think that's really backwards thinking, because actually knowledge multiplies by sharing. In two ways again. One is that, well, maybe if I have something to offer, I should share it so that you also get aware. Second is, maybe I'm just full of shit. In which case, if I share my knowledge, then sunshine will be the disinfectant and people can correct me. So even then, it becomes better. But the other way people think of knowledge is power is that sometimes they get too much into their heads, which is that, oh, I know something and that's complete. Actually, knowing is only the beginning. In reality, action is what matters. Whether it is this talk, whether there's any book you read, all of that is good knowledge. But in the end, it's the actions that we take that define what happens. And what I've seen happen in organizations is that people have a lot of knowledge, but are we actually moving forward? It's really the action how you translate that knowledge into habits that you carry, how you live your day-to-day, that is extremely important. That you basically create your future through your actions. I just want to make sure that we have enough time to questions. So I'm going to wrap up this assumptions. This is a summary I just wanted to note. So the first is, instead of following passions, do what you do with full passion. Success means stress? No. Success is holistic. Third thing is, you manifest your destiny? No, you actually create your destiny with your actions. The perfect leader has all answers. Again, no. Be less wrong, not always right. Knowledge is power. No, it's not about knowledge, it's what you do that matters. So I wanted to summarize that because I think I wanted to give at least 15 minutes for us to just have an even more open discussion. We had some discussion about things that already all of you brought up during the talk. But I actually thought that I want to hear, like, do you even agree or disagree with what I said? Actually, anything else on your mind? Like, I picked this topic, but anything about Microsoft that you're curious about? Anything about your career you want to discuss? Anything that maybe another assumption you want to share? Any comment? Even any advice that you might have for me? So with that, let's open up for discussion. Oh, sorry, there's some. Yeah.
So, quick question on the psychological safety bit of teams, because I've heard that asked around a lot, but I've always, especially at Microsoft, Amazon, these big companies that, sometimes do stack ranking, these kinds of things. As a leader, how are you walking that line of like saying, well, you're not, your job may not on the line, but we need your best performance, that kind of stuff, and, balancing that?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. That, as you said, we have heard about psychological safety a lot, but how do we actually bring it to practice? I think the big thing to me, it really comes down to, and this is why the emphasis on less wrong is so important, that if you have a project, is it about proving yourself right? Or it's about proving us as a collective less wrong. And if you shift that mindset, I think that's where I think you can get to a point where you can have more psychological safety. Because typically where psychological, the Amy Edmondson who gave the first talk on this and then later wrote a book, her example was nurses and doctors. So her example, I don't know if you've watched the talk or read the book, but her example was that there are a lot of cases where the nurses may know about an error, but they don't feel safe calling it out because the doctor is the expert and they don't want to sort of correct him or her. And one of the suggestions they made as a corrective measure was to start doing checklists, where now it's not personal about the nurse correcting the doctor. It's like, okay, here are the 6 things that we need to check for, and looks like 4 and 5 are sort of red or whatever, not being met in this particular case. So making it less personal becomes very, very important. The second is that the leader has to himself or herself set the right trend. How do I react when you oppose me? If I'm the leader, do I respond with curiosity if somebody opposes my point of view? Or do I say, oh, you don't understand, you don't have the experience, and so on? So I think behaviors matter a lot. And it's still an ongoing journey. What I have seen, and I'll admit, like, I'm still trying to learn, is that I've also seen that it's easier to practice psychological safety on smaller things. But when it becomes harder things, leaders tend to fall back on their habits. And that's where I think some of the challenge that I'm seeing happen, where I think if you can have psychological safety on things which are maybe I'll make up like 10 units of impact, but if something is going to change the direction of the company, then the leader wants to be the one making the call. And part of it is, of course, it's their job to make the call, but part of it is also sometimes it becomes a question of, no, this is a call the CEO should be making. It should not be a call that an engineer or a designer can make. So we are still learning, but I do think we are making progress. So, sorry, go ahead.
Thanks for doing the talk. I enjoyed it. The last assumption that you put up, the knowledge is power one, that one was the one that I felt got the most reaction out of myself, as that's an assumption I hold very dear to myself. And so I kind of wanted to just like push back a little on that one.
Yeah.
In the idea that, because like you mentioned how sharing knowledge is good and all of that stuff. And like, yeah, I absolutely agree. By sharing knowledge, we empower everyone, kind of thing. So to me, that like that is part of how knowledge is power. But also the idea of you are what you do. Like I also agree with that. But the idea of, and I don't think you were expressly saying this, but it felt sort of an assumption within what you were saying, that you should be doing kind of thing, rather than thinking on the knowledge. Like it's a, I guess the question that kind of popped up there was, how do you know what to do if you don't have the knowledge, kind of thing? Yeah.
No, I think, by the way, I don't think we're misaligned, but thank you for bringing the question because I want to make it explicit. The challenge that I was mentioning, which I have seen a lot happen both in personal life and in work life, is what I call the knowing-doing gap, which is that people think, oh, because we know everything, then things will just become fine. And what I have seen is that, and this you can sometimes people think of in another way of expressing the same thing is ideas versus execution. That it's like, especially in product development, I can tell you that any idea that Apple had for the iPhone, BlackBerry had that idea when they were building their device as well. It's really about how we translate that into actual product, or if it's personal life, then into your habits, into what you actually do that matters. So my point, I totally agree with you that just randomly doing stuff is not the goal. You really need to have the knowledge so that you can make the best judgment call and make the best decisions. But what I've seen happen in both in organizational sense, product making, is that people will have good ideas, but nothing is happening because they just feel like, oh, because I had the idea, things will become fine. And that's what I was trying to highlight there.
So it sounds like there's a lack of wisdom in how to apply the knowledge. Sort of
it's actually even the lack of application what I'm talking about. Okay. Like take the personal life example. Most people will say exercising is good for you. But actually have you created the time, the priority to do that?
Right.
Same thing at work. Like you may think about, oh, having a fast user experience is important. But if your attention is entirely about adding new features while your current features are slow, then that knowledge doesn't help you. You have to translate into action.
So I wrote down the question so I wouldn't screw it up. From a startup founder's perspective, where investors, mentors, and prospective team members look to you to have all the answers to move your business forward, how do you manage their expectations about your personal knowledge or expertise without losing their interest or help to grow your business?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the distinction I would make here is using the same word knowledge, being knowledgeable versus appearing knowledgeable. So I think as a startup founder or anybody who is in a decision-making role, I think being knowledgeable is extremely important. Because like if I'm an investor, let's say if you are the founder, I want to invest in a company that the founder is a domain expert, knows what they are doing and everything else. Similarly, if I'm an employee, I want to look up to the founder and the CEO and everyone. So I think continuing to increase your knowledge is extremely important. At the other side is appearing knowledgeable and that appearing that I have everything under control. That's what I was emphasizing here, that sometimes, at least in corporate life, but I'm sure in startup life, sometimes said, oh, no, you should always appear like you have everything under control and you have all the answers. And at least my experience has been that that appearance can actually be a hindrance, because now when you don't know, you don't feel safe in saying you don't know. While if somebody is an expert, let's take like, I think Feynman or somebody used to basically say that I don't know much, but he won the Nobel Prize in physics. And the fact that he won the Nobel Prize in physics gave him credibility, not the statement that I don't know much. It's just that when somebody comes across that, okay, yes, I know this, but I know there's a lot of things I don't know, and it's okay. And to me, the evolution I was talking about is the pretense of knowing everything versus actually admitting that, yes, I do have knowledge, that's why I'm the founder, that's why I'm lead this big team, but at the same time, there's so much more for me to know, and being okay with that amount of humility. Thank you, great question. Because I do think that there is at least in some books and all, they do say that, oh, you should always appear like you're always on top of things. And I just think that's a fallacy. And it actually almost sometimes, for me, even decreases the confidence in a person that I meet who acts as if they're on top of everything, because I know that nobody knows everything. So it actually gives me more confidence if somebody shows knowledge, but also shows humility.
We have a couple of questions online. The first one is a comment. It says, one of the objectives to this holistic approach to a big company culture and personal habits is that in order to build small companies and scale quickly, you cannot be holistic, at least at the beginning. I'm wondering his perspective on that.
Yeah, I think a great question that I'll interpret it, but I think it's aligned, is that, okay, maybe you work at Microsoft or Amazon or Google, which are big companies, and you can take a holistic view. If I'm just a startup founder, I don't have a choice. And actually, that's my main learning, is that the struggle is only a struggle if you are thinking of it as a necessary evil for the future. But actually embrace the struggle. I'll tell you from my own career, the days that I have enjoyed, like one of the lessons I have is that the quality of your life is defined by the quality of your days. And the days that I've enjoyed the most are the ones that I've worked the hardest. It's really hard work by itself can be actually very rewarding, very fulfilling. But it's how the work is framed. If I feel autonomy, the work is enjoyable. If I feel empowered, the work is enjoyable. If I feel under the gun, or my boss is going to fire me, or they are going to criticize me, that's not enjoyable. And I think, to me, whether you are in a startup of a single person, yes, there's a lot of challenges in front of you. But at the same time, you can either think of those challenges as a sort of an enemy, or you can say, well, these challenges are how I will succeed. So these are, yes, it'll involve a lot of hard work. I'll have to give it my all. But let's actually enjoy them. And my feeling is that whether you're in a big company, in a small company, whether it's work life, personal life, that kind of rewiring, that kind of shift can be very empowering. And what will happen is both things. One is that I think you'll enjoy your work more, whether you're in a big company or a small company. And I think you'll have better results. Because you won't say that, oh, why am I doing this? Oh, but I really do this because of these things. You just say, okay, this is what needs to be done. How can I find the rose petals? How can I actually make the most of it?
Oh, we have time for one last question.
Hello,
Mr. Serene. My name's Eric, and it's been like really great to like listen to all the insights from this presentation. I just had one question. Given that we know that what we know and we don't know what we don't know, I guess like as a leader, like where's the line that you draw between like when to listen to your team and like when to stick to your own opinion?
Awesome question, Eric. Thank you. Yeah, I think for me, in the end, to me, it's really about having to own the decisions you make. And whether it's from your team, whether it's from a book you read, whether it is from anything else, all of that is input. But in the end, you have to make the decision. Maybe 80% of the time, the decision you make is what your team is telling you to do anyways. But then maybe there's 20% of the time where your judgment will be different. And I think as a leader, you have to embrace it. I've seen both problems, by the way, in my career, sometimes even shown both problems, where I just say, okay, well, I don't want to piss anybody off, so I'm just go with what the team says. Or sometimes I say, no, these guys don't know anything, I need to be the boss. I think the thing is you almost have to, this is the hard thing, you have to take you have to take yourself out. You'd say, what's the right decision to make? And whether it is somebody else's idea or your own idea, like I'll tell you one big problem in life is the addiction to being right. Actually, that's very bad addiction because you will have confirmation bias. At the same time, you do want to be more right, but that does mean that maybe you have to admit more when you have been wrong in the past. So yeah, so I think to your question, think of when you get input, okay, I was thinking X, the team is saying Y, maybe Y is right, but it should be still your decision. It should not be, oh, I want to make him happy, I want to make her happy. Similarly, maybe X is right, then you can say, oh, they did not realize these things, I think X is still the way to go. So yeah, it is a judgment call, and as a leader, the number one thing that you're still, accountability is always with you. That's why you're the leader. Awesome.
Thank you all for joining us today. And from everyone at CoMotion Labs, a big thank you to Gaurav for sharing the story with us. Remember, next Friday at noon, Adam Krenicki, CoMotion's Digital Content and Database Innovation Manager, will present Funding Blitz, where to find the funds your startup needs and how to get them. Sign up today, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.